Ole Miss's wideouts are going to be more dangerous in 2025 than in 2024.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast, hosted by me, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're talking about why the Ole Miss passing attack in 2025 could be more dangerous than ever. 3 key reasons apply. First of all, Cayden Lee has a chance to be the top statistical wide receiver in the entire SEC, even if he doesn't have the name recognition of an 18-year-old phenom named Ryan Williams. Trey, Wallace, and DeSean Stribling, they actually fit Austin Simmons' skill set perfectly, and Stribling is already learning Trey Harris-like buzz in the pre-camp workouts that are going on right now. And tight ends are going to play a much larger role in the offense that are going to add much more flexibility to Lane Kiffin's passing game. Plus, Ole Miss is going to tip off this week of free shots tonight against the Tennessee Volunteers. And I really like Ole Miss in this one. I'll tell you why. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. For your second listen, check out Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy for more takes on the Rebels, college football, the SEC, the whole 9 yards. Pretty interesting stuff. So, last season, Ole Miss had Trey Harris, they had Jordan Watkins, and they had Juice Wells, and everybody was marveling about how good the Ole Miss wide receiver unit could be. And due to a Trey Harris injury midway through the season, and Juice Wells not really having a great year, the wide receiver position last season was Trey Harris in the first 6 games, but it was mainly Jordan Watkins and Cayden Lee as the season progressed. So as good as the wide receiver room was and as much credit as they got and as good as Jackson Dart was, if we're going to be honest about it, it could be better. And Lane Kiffin has sought to address those needs in the transfer portal window. First of all is Cayden Lee. Cayden Lee legitimately has a chance to be the statistical leader in the Southeastern Conference at wide receiver. He is absolutely dominant. He ended up leading Ole Miss last year, I think, in receiving at 57. He had 874 yards, had 2 touchdowns, one of which came from Austin Simmons against Furman early in the season. But that isn't what is making Cayden Lee special. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy. He's not even the quickest guy, but he's the guy that just makes plays. And if you look at his numbers from a year ago, you're talking about somebody that was, let's see, it's 17 and 14. That's 31 for 37 within 20 yards of the line of each other. But the very short passes, he absolutely dominated. If you want to add 10 yards to that more, 5 of 6, 14 and 19, 1 of 1. So 20 of 26 from 10 to 20 yards. This is a guy that did not drop a pass the entire season, and he dominated the line of scrimmage. And when we talk about the strengths of what Austin Simmons does, it is due to his arm strength, his fast processing. So you need people that can work close to the line of scrimmage with Austin Simmons. Now, his deep ball, he throws a very, very pretty deep ball, but a lot of his stuff comes out really, really fast, and he needs somebody to kind of be the Elijah Moore to the Matt Corral in this offense. He has that level of a connection that could go on, and Cayden Lee is that person. I'm talking Cayden Lee could have 90 catches, 1,500 yards next season, 7 touchdowns, and it would not surprise me if he is the alpha dog on this team. But that doesn't mean that Lane Kiffin gave up, because Lane Kiffin went about building this wide receiver room very meticulously and very thoughtful. And one of the players that they went out and got was DeSean Stribling. He's a wide receiver out of Oklahoma State. Had 52 catches, 882 yards, 6 touchdowns. He had nearly 1,000 yards receiving with Alan Bowman as a quarterback. Oklahoma State won 3 or 4 games last season because their quarterback play was so bad. And when you look at the zones, it just jumps out how inaccurate the quarterbacks were as well. 1 of 11 on deep balls outside and left, 2 of 6 in the middle. There was no deep ball in the Oklahoma State offense, but still looking in the middle of the field, the type of players that I said that Lane Kiffin needed to get, 17 of 20, 13 of 22, really good at making contested catches around a lot of people. DeSean Stribling popped up and is a star right now of the pre-spring workouts. I think he's being mentioned in the same breath of doing a lot of stuff that Trey Harris can do. And that's important. A true number one, a wide receiver one in this Ole Miss offense is important. You have to take attention off of Cayden Lee. You have to take attention off the tight ends. You need secondary options in this offense. DeSean Stribling has a chance to be the number one where he puts up big numbers. Him and Cayden Lee kind of ball stuff on the outside and everything goes well. And Austin Simmons has an all-SEC caliber season. That is completely in the cards for Ole Miss this year if DeSean Stribling performs in the season the way he's performing right now. It's important to be in school before the summer. And the ones that do that generally perform better in the fall than people that wait. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So Stribling and another player, Trey Wallace, is going to have a big impact in the season. Trey Wallace, 46 catches, 720 yards, 4 touchdowns. Again, playing for a quarterback-poor team. For some reason, people put Drew Aller on draft boards, and I guess that's the same reason they put Anthony Richardson on draft boards. But if you look at these zones, you can see the problems that exist in the Penn State offense. In the middle of the field, like we said, that's a major piece of what is going on. Trey Wallace, DeSean Stribling, Cayden Lee, they're all monsters in the middle of the field. Trey Wallace was 11 of 14, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a perfect passer rating on passes thrown to him, over 10 yards and below 20 yards downfield in the middle. This is a big deal for him. And you can see exactly what Drew Aller is good at and what he is not good at by looking at these zones. And Trey Wallace, when plays are there to be made, he has made some plays throughout his career. He's a really good player. Now, we contacted an Ole Miss insider, Zach Berry. He said that I think Harrison Wallace III is going to be a big-time addition. He should pair really nicely with Cayden Lee on the inside. He's coming off a really productive season with Penn State, and sources in Happy Valley says he's a big loss for the Nittany Lions. He is a really big loss, and DeSean Stribling has a chance to take Ole Miss to the next level. You have a Cayden Lee, you have a Trey Wallace. You have the makings of an elite wide receiver unit. That's not it for what's going on with Ole Miss. You have other options like Caleb Odom, wide receiver, transfer from Alabama. He is somebody we're going to talk about mainly in the next segment, but him lining up on the wide receiver on the outside will be interesting for that. Deuce Alexander and Traylon Ray, they provide a little bit of speed on the outside. I think they could get some Jordan Watkins type reps as far as the season going on whenever Ole Miss had Trey Harris. So I think you'll see Deuce Alexander or Traylon Ray as the season goes on. Caleb Cunningham, I think he can be extremely impactful. And if he is impactful, that means one of two things. That means either Trey Wallace or DeSean Stribling did not pan out, or Caleb Cunningham got to camp and was as good as Caleb Cunningham could be. One of those two things. But this wide receiver unit is much, much deeper than it was for Ole Miss a year ago. That's not even close. Trey Harris, now, he was a Blentnikoff-worthy winner, and he could have won every award that that college football had. But Juice Wells did not have a good year. Cayden Lee, good player, had a breakout year, has a chance to be the best statistical player in the entire Southeastern Conference this year. this wide receiver unit, because of the way it's set up, just the wide receivers, makes it have the ability to be more dangerous than it was a year ago. Now, one thing that people need to keep in mind is this season is going to be a little bit different because you don't have a quarterback so fixated on the deep ball. Jackson Dart was really good at the deep ball, but Jackson Dart would force the deep ball. We even made comments over the course of the season about ducking, chucking, throwing the ball downfield. And when it wasn't working, there was no plan B. Austin Simmons is not that guy. He's got a good deep ball, but he is more of a cerebral type quarterback, and I think he will take what is given to him. So we'll see exactly how that looks. You know, coming up next, Ole Miss just isn't leaning on wide receivers this season with two true tight ends from the transfer portal and Evan Ingram and an Evan Ingram type added. We're set to have an explosive 12 personnel with Cayden Lee on the field possibly. Stay tuned about that. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right the first time. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like dedicated phone lines, free shippings, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it is your turn. Join Trade Master today at supplyhouse.com/TM to start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. So it's not always going to be about the wide receivers in the passing game. I think the passing game definitely has a chance to take a step over 2024, and 2024 is a record-breaking year. If you want to look at it, Jackson Dart broke the single season passing mark, the single game passing mark. This is nothing against what happened in 2024. This is just going to be a little bit different because it's going to be set up differently, and there are going to be more pieces on the field that can be taken advantage of. I'm really curious to see what happens. And one of the reasons for that is the emergence of Daquan Wright. You know, we went into 2024 talking about Caden Prieskorn. I mean, pretty easy to say. It was Caden Prieskorn this, Caden Prieskorn that. By the end of the year, it was Daquan Wright starting at tight end. And Ole Miss likes to split out tight ends. They usually do not play with an inline tight end. Now, they might this season, but I'll explain that in just a second. But as far as a tight end, it's more of a body type than a position. There's a lot of guys stretched out and you switch releases and stuff like that to get people open, and you have a blocker downfield. It's all part of the plan of what Lane Kiffin likes to do offensively. Daquan Wright, who came on at the end of the year, had 26 catches, 394 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Had a really big game in the Gator Bowl for Ole Miss against Duke, including a touchdown and some nice grabs from Jackson Dart in that game. Daquan Wright is pretty much the inevitable tight end one in this Ole Miss offense, but he wasn't the only one they brought in. You want to look at the zones of Daquan Wright, you're going to see a lot of stuff that's familiar. A lot of work in the middle of the field, a lot of work inside 20 yards, something that is very good. A lot of 90s on the grades. Now, grades from PFF can be problematic, but if you look at where he sits 90-wise, that tells you he's probably doing pretty well. And the NFL passer rating is at 149.3 on the left, 141.4 in the center. Those are the deep passes. Over 100 in the middle zone of the tic-tac-toe board, and 95 on the other side. There's a lot of numbers over 100. So Daquan Wright is somebody to pay attention to. He wasn't the only tight end they brought in, okay? Luke Hasz had 26 catches, 324 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And Ole Miss went and got a Trace Bruckler from New Mexico, had 22 catches, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then there's the hybrid wide receiver. I was thinking about putting him last segment in the wide receiver segment, but he's kind of a wide receiver with a tight end body. 230 pounds. He's a really big guy. He's 6'5". He's Caleb Odom. He's the wide receiver / tight end out of Carrollton, Georgia. 7 catches, 65 yards. He was a 5-star recruit last year. At this time, Alabama was having a 5-star tight end recruit, wide receiver recruit, commit to them and go through the season. He ended up transferring to Ole Miss. He is a super athletic guy. So the reason I bring up all those names, and I just wanted everybody to know what was going on stats-wise, is I see this group. And one of the things I am really good at, other than the fact that I've sat in that building and I've had those conversations and I've watched a ton of film, is when you look at the personnel and what they're doing, it's a lot of receivers that can hit the same zones on the field and attack the same areas and that are really good at attacking them. It is a lot of players that are versatile in what they do. Remember, Ole Miss do not play with an inline tight end very often, whether they're in 10 personnel or 11 personnel. You could have a 4 wide receiver set out there as far as the way it looks, but one of the wide receivers could be Daquan Wright or another tight end. When you bring in a Luke Hasz, who is an elite tight end at Arkansas and a pass catcher, when you bring in a Caleb Odom, who is an elite pass catcher with the body to do a lot of stuff, Ole Miss has versatility for 2025. I always talk about position versatility. I always talk about personnel groupings mattering, and personnel groupings can provide a mismatch of what is going on. When people are going to hear me talk about 12 personnel and assume that those 12 personnel is going to do away with the slot receiver. But that is not necessarily the case in the Ole Miss offense. With them splitting out tight ends normally and running 11 personnel as 10 personnel, 12 personnel ran at 11 personnel is not something that is going to be outside the realm of possibility. So let's talk about 12 personnel and what this offense can look like. And then we'll talk about 13 personnel. This 12 personnel, 13 personnel, 11 personnel, the ability to transfer in and out of those personnel groupings without substituting is going to be a major key in this era of helmet communications, to where you can communicate to a person on the field to help against tempo. The ability to not match up is going to be the advantage now. Before, it was just going fast. Now it's going to be the ability to go fast and not allow the other team to match up to what you're doing. So whenever you're lining up with a 10 personnel look, but it's actually a 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, the defense is going to match up to the personnel group. So if your wide receivers and tight ends are able to take advantage of that on the outside, there's your matchup advantage. But if they try to play that straight up with a base defense, you can be in 12, 13 personnel with Luke Hasz, Daquan Wright, and Caleb Odom all on the field at the same time, going down the field with a 4-wide set, inline tight ends, double tight end sets, without the other team allowed to substitute. You have a chance to get an advantage in the personnel game. And one of the advantages that you can have is through 2 tight ends and Cayden Lee on the field at the same time. Whenever you have that tight end lined up in the background, whenever you set him up in the slot, you set one of the bigger guys up on the outside, you have a chance to have a completely different look that the other team can't match up with, and they're going to be in a little bit worse case matching up with a DeSean Stribling or a Cayden Lee. I do genuinely think that in this age of helmet communication, this is the future of football. Ole Miss being able to run tempo with looks that are 11, 10, 12, 13 personnel, going down the field without substituting and putting the defense in a hard situation to where if they try to match up on the outside passing game, you can kill them with the running game. And Ole Miss has brought in some good running backs as well. We're going to talk about them as spring practice gets a little bit closer. But Cayden Lee being able to incorporate it into 12 personnel as a slot receiver with the freedom and positional versatility that Ole Miss has, that is the thing that I'm interested in. Now, spring football starting, I think 2 weeks from yesterday is the start of spring football. And everybody's like, well, what are you going to see in spring football? Not much. Because right now, across college football, every single coach is scared to death of a depth chart and the spring transfer portal window, to the point where they're doing away with spring games. It's not because they don't want them. They're not because they're not worth it. They do it because they're scared of the spring transfer portal window. If you get rid of that spring transfer portal window, you're going to see spring games kind of rematerialize, and you might even see like FCS opponents at the end of spring. That is something that I think could happen. But as long as there's a spring transfer portal window, they're not going to do a depth chart. They're not going to make it harder on themselves. So it kind of is what it is. So just a little heads up about that. That's one of the reasons, though, Ole Miss having a hot dog eating contest. My surgery is the Wednesday before the spring game. So in our final segment tonight, Ole Miss hosts Tennessee at the Pavilion in a game the Rebels can win if they play their best. It could be a huge night for Ole Miss. Stay with us for all the insight on tonight's game. All right, Ole Miss and Tennessee tonight. This is a big game. This is a really big game. And looking at what can happen for Ole Miss in this game, it's all good. There's nothing negative that can happen barring an injury to one of the key players. I mean, that's the negative that could happen in this game. But as far as a win or a loss, there's only good that can come from this game. If Ole Miss wins, they're likely going to jump a seed line. However you view them, if they're 7 right now, they jump to 6. If they're 6 right now, they jump to 5. That is the benefit for Ole Miss. If Ole Miss loses the game, you just lost to a quad 1 team that is likely going to have a number 1 or a number 2 seed next to their name. No harm, no foul. And with Florida coming up on the weekend, it's going to be at least a little bit interesting. The keys in this game are going to be interesting. I think Ole Miss needs to run Tennessee off the three-point line. When Tennessee is at their best, they're hitting three-point shots. If Tennessee is not shooting well, Ole Miss is one of the few teams in this league, in the SEC, that can win a rock fight with Tennessee. Texas A&M is kind of the other what's going on. But it's going to be important to run Tennessee off the three-point line and kind of make it into a 2-point game. Be competitive on the boards versus Tennessee on Wednesday. This is a scheduled tweet. It is. Ole Miss needs to keep it within 10 rebounds in this game. If you get absolutely dominated, it's going to be problematic, because the next phase, the next key, is what we're going to talk about, how we counteract what's going on. But Ole Miss needs to be competitive against Tennessee, at least for stretches in this game. And the third one is take care of the ball, because how you handle the way that Tennessee defends you is going to determine the outcome of the game. If Ole Miss can turn the ball over probably 9 or 10 or less times, you're probably going to be in good shape. Tennessee is a problem defensively, and they come at it different ways. We always talk about the Chris Beard no middle defense. Well, Rick Barnes does something of his own style of defense to where they just guard you a little bit of a different way. So it will be interesting. Our players to watch in this game: Matt Morrell, how is he going to play? This is his last game against Tennessee. He's a Memphis resident. This game probably means a little bit to him. So we'll see how Matt Morrell does in this game. Malik Dia started at Vanderbilt. A game against Tennessee is going to be meaningful to him. And then the catalyst for Ole Miss this season, it seems like, is Dre Davis. When Dre Davis gets into foul trouble, when he's reaching, when he picks up cheap fouls at the game, when he's not scoring, Ole Miss isn't as effective as they could be. When he's on, though, Ole Miss is really good. If you look at the Kentucky game, if you look at the Texas game during the middle run of the season, Dre Davis did a lot of the hard work for Ole Miss that allowed them to be successful. Malik Dia just needs to embrace bully ball in this game. Tennessee is really good and really aggressive on the boards. Malik Dia is a good elite athlete. He needs to act like it, and he kind of needs to play bully ball in this game and not hang out at the three-point line. And like I said, Matt Morrell just needs to stay healthy and give everything he can, because if he's making shots, Ole Miss is doing all right. Like I said, I feel pretty good about this game. I think Ole Miss is going to win this game 63-58. The reason I think that is because Ole Miss finally got some good feelings. Ole Miss is a good basketball team. Anybody that says Ole Miss is not a good basketball team has an agenda. Ole Miss winning it against a team in Tennessee that beat Alabama on a buzzer beater when Alabama kind of choked the game away, you're due for an emotional letdown. So whenever Tennessee goes from Thompson Bowling Arena on the road, they're due for a little bit of a letdown. And Ole Miss's players know this is a game that they can get, as opposed to necessarily going on the road to play potential number 1 seed Florida on senior night in Gainesville. This is a game that I think Chris Beard has circled, and this is his chance to get that 10th win and get up that seed line. Now, one thing that's important for what's going on, the question becomes, do you want to be a 6 seed? It's either 4, 5, 6, or 7. That's kind of the ballpark that Ole Miss lives in at the moment. 4 and 5 matches up in the Sweet 16 with the number 1 seed. So you're going to be on the side of the bracket with the number 1 seed. But 6 or 7 matches up on the same side with the 2 seed and the 3 seed. So theoretically, worse teams that you could see a little bit longer. So if Ole Miss is looking for matchups to make a run, and I talked for weeks about Ole Miss needing matchups, maybe that number 2 seed inside of the bracket is better off. You do not want the 8-9 game, because then you get the number 1 seed in the second round. That you do not want that game. So 7 is the lowest that Ole Miss wants, but I think 6 or 7 Ole Miss will be happy with, because the 6 seed ends up with the number 3 seed in the second round, and potentially the playing the number 2 seed in the Sweet 16 or something like that. So it should be pretty interesting. And by the way, I saw a bracket that would be absolutely hilarious. It had Ole Miss as a 6 seed in the same bracket with Texas Tech as a 3 seed. And Chris Beard playing Texas Tech would be pretty hilarious. So thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports, and thank you for making us Ole Miss's morning show. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number 1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in all of college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everyone. And remember, analytics is just the old English word meaning bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.